Here to have a friendly discussion on the topic is founder and CEO of the White Rose Resistance and host of the Seth Gruber Show, Seth Gruber. All right, Seth, so I want to have just an honest, transparent discussion about this. And before we go there, just so that you know my position on it so we can have a good groundwork. Personally, I am pro-life. I also understand, however, that this is this abortion issue, and as it pertains to restrictions and bans and states' rights, is going to be very important in November. And it is my firm belief that we lost a lot of important races in the 2022 midterms because of this issue, maybe in part due to Republicans' failure to really message it correctly. But I think it's important to just have the discussion about where we're headed, and especially now that Donald Trump last week gave us a message saying that he supports the Dobbs decision, the overturn of Roe v. Wade, sending it back to the states, and that he believes that that's where it should be. So moving from that premise, I want to get your thoughts on Donald Trump and where he is on it and where you think the Republican Party should be on the issue headed into this next election.
Thank you, Tomi. I appreciate your voice and your willingness to have these conversations. I'm very grateful for Donald Trump's role in overturning Roe versus Wade. He appointed 3 Supreme Court justices, and the decision went 5-4. So it only got overturned because of all 3 Supreme Court appointments from Donald Trump. He's ripped Hillary Clinton and other radical pro-abortion advocates, and I'm grateful for that. However, I do think the pro-life movement, Tomi, needs to be very vocal in this time. I think we're on the precipice, actually, of watching the GOP begin to adopt a pro-choice platform. And this has happened in other countries. This happened in Canada. The Conservative Party in Canada now supports abortion. They now support the killing of babies in the womb, Tomi. It wasn't that way years ago. The Conservative Party in Canada used to be pro-life, and they slowly tolerated and gave ground on this most fundamental of human questions, which is, what does it mean to be a human being? Who counts as one of us? And do we all get to share these equal rights, the right to life equally, or do some people get them and others don't? If Donald Trump, the recognized leader of the Republican Party, who I have voted for, okay, begins to say that the role moving forward for the conservative movement and the Republican Party is to let each state decide and then rest the case there, that may be the beginning of the end of a pro-life platform in the Republican Party. And that's the only party we have at our disposal right now to have a political, viable opportunity to protect our preborn brothers and sisters. So I think we need to be very loud in saying this is not acceptable.
Well, the pro-life movement certainly is loud. That's not an issue that that you have at all. But I would argue that maybe this issue might not be so much a political issue as it is a personal and a religious issue. And so to me, I think the frustration for me lies that I agree with the overturn of Roe v. Wade. I believe that it should be decided by the states. I don't believe that it should be decided on a federal level. So it feels to me like the conservative movement and the pro-life movement worked so hard to get to that point to then reverse course and say, oh no, it should be a federal decision. We need a ban. And so that's, to me, that's where some of the mixed messaging is, where it's like, okay, this was a great victory for states' rights and the pro-life movement, but now it seems like that's not enough. And I know that you're going to say it's never enough because we always have to protect life. But if we look at this from a realistic position and not an idealistic one, don't you think that some of that mixed messaging has led to lost elections and lost opportunities to not only protect life, but to protect our country as a whole?
Yeah, thank you, Tomi. I have been ripping what I call woke, weak, and wimpy pro-life establishment leaders for actually many, many years. And so I understand what you're saying about the mixed messaging. That mixed messaging has not come from me and some of my friends and leaders in the pro-life movement. It's come from other organizations who did say that their primary goal as the pro-life movement was to overturn Roe versus Wade. What I'm saying, Tomi, is that this is the beginning of the pro-life movement, not the end of the pro-life movement. And here's why. If we believe that it is always wrong to intentionally kill innocent human beings, and that abortion intentionally kills an innocent human being because it is not a religious opinion that human life begins at conception. Tomi, I'll send you sometime a scan from an International Planned Parenthood Federation health booklet 9 years before Roe v. Wade in 1964, saying that they all knew that human life begins at conception and abortion kills a baby and it's dangerous to the mother's health and life. Openly admitting, Planned Parenthood, that human life begins at conception. Not a religious opinion. We know this scientifically. And so abortion kills an innocent human being. That's indisputable. Which I kind of appreciate Bill Maher's very open, honest comments recently. He's like, it's kind of murder, and it kind of is, and I'm just okay with that. And so we actually cannot choose to allow states to decide which humans get to be killed and which humans get to be saved if we believe in the science that human life begins at conception. And I'm going to risk offending you and your audience because I appreciate you and your very bold and courageous voice, Tomi. This was the same debate Stephen Douglas and Abraham Lincoln were having for the 1860 election. Stephen Douglas was the state rights candidate. He believed each state should be able to determine whether the black man was a person or should be treated like chattel and whipped as a slave. He supported states' rights to determine whether the black human being is a person with rights that should be protected by our government. Abraham Lincoln believed what eventually became the Emancipation Proclamation, which is that no, we're not going to allow some states to murder and whip black people and other people to protect them. We have a 14th Amendment. You cannot be deprived of life, liberty, or property without due process of law. The preborn child is a person. I'm of the opinion, and many other people in the pro-life movement, that this is the beginning of the pro-life movement, and we're not going to rest until we get 38 states for a constitutional amendment to ban abortion at the federal level.
So, Seth, a few questions for you, and this could be a very long debate because I have a lot of them.
I'm
but
sure
my question for you would be, and I think I probably already know the answer, but do you believe in any exceptions to abortion bans? Are you there, or are you just an all-out ban, no exceptions?
So I don't support any exceptions metaphysically, philosophically. However, I understand why a very bold pro-life Republican politician might put in a rape or incest exception if they're trying to get the ban, but they don't have the votes at the state level to get the ban to the governor's desk. So I'm a absolutist metaphysically and philosophically and idealistically, but I am willing to be an incrementalist strategically because that's how the left has completely upended the culture. They've done it incrementally, right? They weren't going full on pedophilia in the 1980s, and now it seems that they are. They have moved incrementally in their revolution. And so I'm willing to take those wins if we don't have the votes for an abortion ban. But yes, let me be very clear to your question. I and many large percentages of the pro-life movement and evangelicalism in America and Catholicism are not happy and will not be happy and will not rest until there is a complete ban. So we might support an exception to get a bill passed because we didn't have the votes, but we won't stop and won't be satisfied with that.
Okay. I understand that you won't be happy, but you're going to be unhappy for a long time because, unfortunately, the country's not with you on this issue. And I don't think it's because people are inherently evil or they don't care about life. I think that people are just in different places and people exist on a spectrum on the issue. And I think it's a touchy one. And a lot of people, personally are very pro-life like you and would make that decision for themselves. But it's very hard for them, myself included, when government starts becoming involved in these issues. We feel like it's more of an issue for the faith and for the church and for philanthropic organizations to encourage life. But I have to ask you, there's been a lot of Republicans and someone I don't particularly like, Nikki Haley, that have come out very boldly and said, hey, listen, Republicans can lie to you all day long and say they can get a federal abortion ban, but they can't. They do not have the votes. They're not going to have the votes. The court of public opinion is not in their favor, nor are the voters. So what do you say to that argument that you can talk about what you personally want, but it's probably never going to happen in this country unless there is a dramatic and drastic shift that I think you and I both know probably isn't going to happen?
Well, we've been surprised. Our country has a very interesting history, Tomi. It's very unexpected things can happen. Here's an example to your question. A Gallup poll in 2019, Tomi, reported that only 13% of the American public, not Republicans or Democrats, 13% of the American public supported third trimester abortions. 13% of Americans think that it should be legal to kill a baby in the 9th month, in the 3rd trimester. However, under Roe versus Wade, what was the federal law, Tommy? Abortion through all 9 months of pregnancy for any reason or no reason at all. And funded by the taxpayer, by the way. And that was nearly 50 years of Roe versus Wade in all 50 states. Did that reflect the culture? Not at all. But the left is unyielding, they're uncompromising, and they push and push and push. I mean, they're kind of like whining, petulant, spoiled children. They cry and scream and whine until they get what they want. We need to be as loud and as vocal for what we want. Maybe the public isn't prepared to grant the right to life to all unborn children in all 50 states, just like the public wasn't prepared to grant personhood to the black man, and we ended up fighting a civil war over it. However, I really appreciate your honesty in this conversation, Tommy, and I want to say one more thing, because I've heard you say, and I appreciate how candid you are on this, that you believe in supporting legal abortion in some circumstances. You're supporting a limited government that doesn't overinsert itself into the lives of its citizens. However, I would like to just gently and respectfully challenge you and your listeners that it's actually your support of legal abortion that has created and is creating the rapid expansion of government and state power that you fear. And here's what I mean by that. My friend Nancy Pearcey puts it this way. She said, a rapid expansion of state power began with abortion, because in the past, the law recognized personhood as a pre-existing reality, something that followed metaphysically on simply being biologically human. So the law merely recognized this as a pre-political right. But the only way the state can legalize abortion is to deny the relevance of biology and declare that there are some biological humans who are not persons. So the state has taken on itself the authority to decide which humans qualify for the status of personhood, defined in terms of mental abilities, the capacity to think, feel, and desire. These are the arguments pro-choicers make to say that the unborn child is not a person yet. But the same reasoning is now being applied to euthanasia and assisted suicide as well. So this same worldview was applied first to babies in the womb. They said the fetus was a non-person, Tommy, right? Expendable, disposable, and fair game for research and experimentation. But today, secular bioethicists have begun to apply that same dehumanizing logic to those already born. Because according to personhood theory, your rights and dignity consist in your ability to exercise conscious, deliberate control over your lives. So if a disabled patient, for example, loses that mental control due to disease or injury, then personhood itself would be lost, even though the patient is still alive and human. What I'm saying is, when you rip the term human and person apart, and you say you can be biologically human but not a person because you don't have certain cognitive abilities yet, we're putting in place the premises that justify our own enslavement for born people who fail to meet the same functional litmus test that the preborn child fails to meet in the womb. If we don't get this most basic of rights right, we will one day wake up and find that that dehumanizing worldview is knocking on our door as well.
Seth, I understand what you're saying, and you put it very eloquently, and you obviously have a lot of facts behind you, a lot of science behind you, and I understand your premise and I understand your passion for the issue. But I think where the ultra pro-life movement loses people is that, unlike murder and dehumanizing people and slavery and people not counting, there's a lot of people who look at the abortion issue and they don't look at it as a mother wanting to murder somebody. They look at it as somebody who is in a very vulnerable position that feels as though they have no way out. And instead of the church and the community rallying around that person and encouraging life, a lot of folks say, you know, the government isn't the person that's going to convince that very vulnerable person to make the pro-life decision. And therefore, the government stepping into this issue is actually not solving the problem of maintaining life. It's just, unfortunately, putting somebody in an even more vulnerable position and making it a government political decision. So for me, I don't disagree with what you're saying. As a Christian, I agree with you. I just don't think the government involvement gets you to that place, because I think there are a lot of women that are in that circumstance that they don't care that there's going to be a ban or a this ban, that ban. They're going to do it regardless. So that whole notion of safe, legal, rare, a lot of Americans are in that category. And unfortunately, for the pro-life movement, that's a reality that needs to be grappled with. So where do you, in real life terms, with where the country sits, How do you grapple with that? And how do you convince people to be personally pro-life when the public opinion just isn't there in terms of no exceptions, in terms of life being at the conception, a national ban? How do you get people there?
Yeah, well, Anthony Breitbart put it beautifully when he said politics is downstream of culture. But culture is also downstream of politics, Tomi. It's actually a two-way street. Let me give you proof of that. Roe versus Wade. Did you know the median average of annual abortions before in about 1970, 1971, Tomi, was about a 90,000 median, about 90,000 average in 1 year in America in the early 1970s. Guess what the total annual abortion rate was, Tomi, in 1975 and 1976, a couple years after Roe versus Wade? 1.6 million.
I'm sure it exploded. But I have to also ask you now that
clearly law influences behavior.
I have to ask you, though, you're right. But Seth, let's look at the numbers, because since the overturn of Roe v. Wade, which I agree with, abortions have also gone up. So that would signal to me that maybe all of this is not working in the way the pro-life movement intended.
Well, I can't speak for the entire pro-life movement. I can speak for what I believe is the correct position in my organization, which is like, we're just getting started. And I really don't care if my opinion and what we're pushing for does not mirror public opinion right now. I think we actually have to start functioning in the same strategical manner that the left always has.
But
which
how do you do that when the whole Republican Party is not? When the whole Republican Party is not with you, when the leader of our party is not with you? I want to take your personal passions aside, and I want to look at this again. I want to get back to, if we lose on this issue, and we lose the White House, and we lose Republican ballots up and down in every which direction, how do we, knowing that we're going to lose everything largely because of this issue, how do we advance any other societal good that the conservative Republican movement wants to advance, like securing our border, like fixing our economy? How do we get there if we keep losing elections? I know your personal opinion, but your personal opinion is going to lead to the Republican Party losing and not being able to do a damn thing, Seth. Let's be honest.
So you and me are both Christians, Tomi, and so I believe that God intervenes in the affairs of men. And I believe that if we
but I have to get away from the idealistic thing. But let's just be honest, Seth. You and I both know that if Republicans came and they had the same opinion as you, for no exceptions and a federal abortion ban in totality, you know that any Republican that takes that stance is going to lose their election pretty much in any place in this country. So I don't think, and I love what you're saying about God intervening, but let's be honest. God did intervene in the 2022 midterms. I don't think God's going to intervene in 200 days. If Republicans run on this issue, where you stand on it, they will lose. Do you agree or disagree?
I'm not sure. It looks like they could lose, but I don't know how it will all pan out. I do know this. A conservative movement that does not prioritize the total and complete abolition of abortion as its highest political priority will one day wake up and find that there is nothing left to conserve. Those who murder the unborn cannot be trusted to govern the born. And the longer we've tolerated the destruction, mutilation, and murder of the preborn in America, the sooner we found that they're never satisfied simply coming after the unborn. They're throwing pro-life sidewalk counselors in prison. They're trying to remove the medical licenses of pro-life OBGYNs who share what Fauci calls abortion, quote, misinformation. They never stop at the unborn. Now it's parents speaking at school board meetings who are domestic terrorists. I'm actually suggesting that we be as unyielding and uncompromising in protecting the preborn as the Democrat Party is in their unyielding, uncompromising position in murdering the unborn. Good luck getting elected as a Democrat if you're slightly pro-life. Good luck getting the nomination for president from the Democrat Party if you're slightly pro-life.
Oh, but I understand that the left is radical on the issue.
We're willing to vote for pro-abortion, pro-choice Republicans, even if they just want to kill, rape, incest babies, babies or first trimester babies. That toleration of evil has led to more and more broad acceptance in the conservative movement in the GOP. What we tolerate, we eventually accept. What we accept, we eventually start celebrating. And what we celebrate, we eventually end up participating in. And unfortunately, Kari Lake and Donald Trump are actually great examples of that rule. We need to start putting a line in the sand and having some uncompromising positions. I simply don't think we can trade the lives of innocent human beings to win elections.
Well, I respect your opinion. I disagree with you on it because I believe in order to do anything, you have to first win an election. And that goes for everything that we want to do in this country when it comes to illegal immigration, when it comes to election integrity, when it comes to our economy, when it comes to our foreign policy. I think you have to win to be able to do anything. And if we had not won in 2016, there would have never been the overturn of Roe v. Wade. So I'm of the opinion that you have to have victories and you have to be able to win something in order to win big in other places and in order to change public opinion and move it closer to a pro-life agenda. But
Which is why I support incremental victories.
Okay. Well, maybe we can.
And I'm willing to take incremental wins with you to get to the total goal. But I do think that pro-life evangelical voters need to start being very loud.
So that's my last question
and getting
for you.
New candidates.
This is my last question for you. Speaking of new questions, so would this issue and Donald Trump's position on this issue mean that you're not going to be voting for Donald Trump in November?
It's something that I have seriously been praying about because I'm not sure that we can reform the Republican Party if we continue to tolerate and vote for pro-choice candidates. However, I'm also a realist and I'm also an incrementalist when I need to be.
Are you a realist?
Yes, I am. But so, for example, here's one example, Tommy. I want a new FDA commissioner. They're shipping the abortion pill via snail mail. And teenagers and everyone can get the abortion pill, even where states are illegal. Fathers are finding their teenage daughters dead on the bathroom floor, hemorrhaging out because she had an ectopic pregnancy. And you don't have to visit a physician anymore, thanks to Biden and this administration. Now you get the abortion pill, which is killing over 50% of babies in America every year, to your mailbox, delivered to your home. I would love an incremental victory if Trump's reelected of firing the FDA commissioner, getting a new one, and making the abortion pill illegal, which is what pro-choicers used to support. Because of how dangerous it is for women.
I can agree with you on that one. But first, Seth, you got to win an election. And if the pro-life movement will not vote for Donald Trump because they're upset about this particular issue, we will lose the election. Biden or Kamala or Gavin Newsom will be your president. And then I shudder to think what's going to happen in terms of this issue. I wish we could debate this all day long because I've got more questions for you, but I appreciate the conversation. It's a conversation that needs to be had. There is, obviously a spectrum of opinions on the issue, and it's important to dissect those. And I really appreciate your time and coming on and having the discussion with me. And I welcome you back anytime because it's not going away anytime soon.
Thanks for the opportunity, Tomi.
Thanks, Seth.